the help of Hashem, we are learning Rosh Hashana Daf Lamed Dalid. We are heading into the second to last daf in the Masechta. We actually left off on Daf Lamed Gimel, Amid Beis, the second line from the top of the Amid. We're going to have a quick review of the sugya that we just learned recently regarding mitzvahs. Tzrichos kavana, whether mitzvahs ain't tzrichos kavana, even if you hold that mitzvahs ain't tzrichos kavana, but nesasek will not be acceptable. So we're going to have the Gemara referring back to that. Then we're going to start the Mishnah Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. That's going to actually speak about the blowings, the blasts of the shofars. And as we today know that we blow what we call tashrat, tashat, tarat, as we'll explain, tkiya, shvarim, teruah, tkiya. We blow tkiya, shvarim, tkiya, tkiya, teruah, tkiya. But we'll see how this evolved. It didn't begin this way. As we will be learning, really the Torah speaks about blowing teruah. Then we learn that whenever God says to blow a teruah sound, it also means that prior and post to the teruah sound, there should be a tkiya sound. So that's tkiya, teruah, tkiya. Then we will see, all today we're going to learn in Braisas, that there is a 3-time mention of blowing the teruah, and amazingly, not regarding Rosh Hashana, but only when we put together the mitzvah of blowing shofar or teruah on Rosh Hashana. In Rosh Hashana, Hashem mentions twice teruah. Yom Kippur Yovel. The Torah mentions once blowing the teruah. We're going to have a hekesh. We're going to have a gzeira shava. We're going to combine them all together. We're going to have a total of 3 teruahs. And again, every time teruah means tkiya, teruah tkiya. So that's going to mean that we got to blow the shofar. Here's how this is evolving 3 times. And we link it. We blow it once after the psukim of Malchiyos, after the psukim of Zechronos, and after the psukim of Shofros. Then we're going to begin learning again today that it's not clear what teruah means. Whether teruah means what we call a teruah, whether teruah means what we call a shvarim, as we're going to speak out, whether it means both together. So we blow them all together. Now, by the way, that doesn't explain all of the soundings that we make nowadays. Because if we begin with 3 times tkiya, teruah, tkiya, the 3 times really becomes 9 times because we don't know what teruah means. That's only 9. We're going to see how this became 30, how the 30 became 60, 90, how the 60, 90 became 100, and now we blow another 30. And by the way, this is part of the Chavivus mitzvah when we learned a while back that we confused the Satan. So one of the approaches we gave is that when the Satan sees how much we love the mitzvahs, that we go beyond, to cover every angle, that type of love of God, which is expressed through the keeping the mitzvah so meticulously, transforms all of our sins into merits. That's the pshat we quoted. So the reason why the Satan gets confused, it's not that he knows. He didn't forget from last year. There's a Chassidish word that every year there's a new Satan. But one approach is when he sees how we ultimately transform all of our transgressions into merits, he stops making us sin. Because if he succeeds in making us sin, we're going to make that into a schus. We're going to have, if we'll have time, we're going to start the sugya towards the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph, turning to Daf Lamed Daled, Amud Beis. What were to happen if we didn't hear all of the soundings together? If they were spread out? If there was a huge pause in between each sounding, and we know regarding other areas that there is a limit of how much you can pause, like by Shema. If you take a little break, you're good. If you take too long of a break, the time that it will take you to finish the whole Shema, the whole Shemana Esrei, you got to go back to the beginning. We're going to see how this affects the blowings of the shofar and much more. So, Chavra, let us start. And Daf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis, we are in the second line from the top of the Amid. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'ar kol niv'dai. All right, so we learned in the Mishnah that that someone who, let's type the word, absent-mindedly is blowing the shofar, lo yatsa, that person did not fulfill his obligation. So says the Gemara, that implies that if you did not blow the shofar absent-mindedly, if you knew what you are blowing, you intended to blow the sounds of what we just mentioned, the tashrat, the tashat, the tarat, but you did not do it for the mitzvah. You were tekeya l'shir. You find these sounds the most beautiful melody. You made those sounds for a melody. you knew what you were doing, you had in mind to make those sounds, but it was not l'shem mitzvah. So that's already not mesasik. That's already yotza. And by the way, that's taka, the machlokes we had. We said machlokes amoyroim, Rava Rabba or Rab Zeda. Then we said it's a machlokes tanoim. Then this really plays its way out all the way through the Rishonim. So could we infer from our mitzvah, from our Mishnah, Lebe Mesayele to the sheet of Rava, that the Amar Rava Hatukei Lashir, as long as you did not blow it absent-mindedly, as long as you had in mind to make those sounds, even though you didn't do it l'shem mitzvah yatsa. So the Gemara says, not necessarily so, or we cannot say that our Mishnah is not like Rab Zera, because Dilma, Toikeya Lashir, Nami Misasik Karilei. How do you interpret the word Misasik? So we kept on translating Misasik means mamash absent-mindedly. You would just stop making sounds. So if exactly the right sounds came out, you're not yoitza. That's for sure. The other shitas will learn that even if you blew the shofar wanting to make the sounds of tashrat, tashat, tarat, if you did not do it l'shem mitzvah, that's called misasik. That's the way they will learn pshat in the Mishnah. So our Mishnah cannot be used for either way. It says in the Mishnah further that if a person heard the soundings of the blasts min ha misasik, from someone who was blowing it again in an absent-minded way, also lo yatsa. So here again, says the Gemara, let's infer from our Mishnah, again, not like Rab Zera. Aval hashumeya min hamashmiya la'atzmai. What happens if someone is not blowing it l'masasik? Let's say I'm blowing the shofar for me l'shem mitzvah, for me. I just didn't have you in mind. Mashma from the Mishnah, it's good. What's the only problem is if I'm blowing it misasik. But the moment I am not blowing it misasik, but only for me, that even you can be yoitza. So lema to have it to yufta the Rab Zera, as we just learned above, the Amar Rab Zera, that the Amar Rab Zera l'shamoy, Rab Zera told his attendant, oh, blow for me, have me in mind. Dichavin v'tak ali. Meaning, if you, intendant, Jew, if you blow it for you, good for you, but I'm not going to be yoitza. You have to have me in mind. The Mishnah seemingly is implying that you don't have to have the listener in mind. So the Gemara says, again, you cannot infer anything from our Mishnah. It's normal that the Mishnah, for the sake of symmetry, will use in one clause words similar to the clause prior. Maybe Dilma, either the Tani Reisha, the word Mesasik, Tama Nama Sefa Mesasik, but really, even if the blower blew it intentionally, intent l'shem mitzvah, if he did not have in mind the listener won't be yoitza. So again, our Mishnah cannot be used, not to Rava, not to Rab Zera. And Chevre, here we start the Mishnah Seder Tkiyas. And we will see, and hopefully experience, how Torah Shebal Peh developed. And God willing, we'll mention towards the end of today's shiur, the classic question. Then, not classical, the classic question, as was, how could there have ever been a doubt what Teruah means? In other words, let's say by Tefillin. By Tefillin it makes sense. I don't see the parshiyas inside my Tefillin. So when you're going to tell me just wear what your father wore, I don't know exactly what my father wore. I only see the outside. When it comes to the soundings of the shofar, we blow it every year. How would we not know? We have a tradition, we have a Messiah. How did it happen that the Teruah, we'll see, we don't know what Teruah means. So they did this, they did that, then we'll see in Amoira says to do it all. This is a very important question, and we're going to quote at least one approach of Rab Hai Goin that's quoted by many of the Rishonim, and so much more. But let's begin. This is how it begins. Seder Tkiya Shalish al Shalish al Shalish Shalish. Every time you make soundings, it's going to be a set of three, and we call that Chevra. Let's get familiar with the words. Tkiya, Teruah, Tkiya. That's three. But once Tkiya, Teruah, Tkiya, or Tarat, is not enough. You got to blow that 3 times. We'll see in the Gemara where do we learn that from. We know that each one is connected to one of the Malchiyos, Zechroina, Shofars, and we had in the previous Sugah. That's how we're beginning. Shiur Tkiya. What's the length of a Tkiya? So the din is Kishaloish Teruahs. The length of the Tkiya should be the length of 3 Teruahs. Now what does that mean? There's so much to speak about, but let's keep on reading. Shiur Teruah, what's the length of a Teruah? Kishaloish Yevavos. Now there are 2 words that we will continuously be using. Yevava, in English it means a sob. A sob is a very short-sounded sound. That's a sob. Ganuche is called in Yiddish a krechts, or maybe in English, a moan, or a good on oi. So Ganuche is a longer sound, and Yevava is in Chazal a shorter sound. But in the Mishnah, in the times of the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah is using the words Yevavos, still not clear what that is. Says the Mishnah that the shiur of a teruah is like 3 Yevavos. Rashi, unlike many other Rishonim, a teruah is 3 Yevavos. The Hersverter, according to Rashi, a teruah is ta-ta-ta. Look inside Rashi over here. Shalosh Yevavos, Shalosh Koilos Ba'alma. But what type of Koilos? Kol Shehu. Kol Shehu means not the krecht, not the moan, right? Not the ganuche. So that's an interesting sheet. And we don't paskin this way. We paskin like other Rishonim that interpret that a teruah is 3 sets of 3 koilos, which is how we paskin. No, it's a minimum of 9 times. But that's not Rashi. Now what does that mean? So it means that the tkiya, just the way we learn, the tkiya should be like ta-ta-ta. The length of the tkiya, according to Rashi, should be the same length that it takes to make 3 small sounds. So what does it mean, shiur tkiya k'shalosh teruos? It should be shiur tkiya k'teruah. The Gemara is going to address that. What's the flow of the Mishnah doesn't go. Now there are so many different ways of learning, but we're going to learn as we try to always learn Gemara Rashi. Here Mishnah Rashi. Now, before we go on, we have to learn a little bit of the Tosfos. And God willing, we'll get everything in it today. So look inside the top Tosfos. Shiur teruah k'shalosh yevavos, peirush bekontres, shalosh koilos ba'alma kol shehu. Makes it clear. A teruah is 3 little sounds. Tu-tu-tu. And the tkiya, that's Rashi. Tkiya should be the length of. Ulakama namrinon, as we have to get there today in the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, that Rabbo enacted in the city of Kesari, and we follow his enactment, that to cover all the possibilities. Now, it's good to get familiar with these abbreviations. When we refer to what Tosfos is about to write, instead of the kuf, we write a taf for tkiya. Tosfos and many Rishonim didn't write taf for tkiya because teruah begins with the taf. So for the tkiya they write a kuf, which is the second letter of the word tkiya. Kashrak, which means tkiya, shvarim teruah tkiya. Kashak, karak. Chevra, today we're going to call this tashrat, tashat, tarat. I hope no one is getting confused. Why? Because the mesupak, because we have a doubt, betruah dekro. What did Hashem mean when he writes the word teruah? If it means a teruah mamish, what we call a teruah, which is yalule yalul, means sab, little short sounds, or does the teruah of God mean shvarim, broken sounds, but broken sounds, each sound is longer, which is what the Chazal call ganuchai ganach, groaning or moaning, or that was Rabbi Bo's addition, maybe it means both. Oy shvarim v'teruah. Now says Tosfos that a few down, I have to go quick. This is the chiddush of Tosfos, that whichever sound you are making, it should not be based on Rashi, that the minimum teruah on Rashi, not 9, 3, ta-ta-ta. Says Rashi, if you're going to make a shvarim, as long as ta-ta-ta, you know what you just did? You turned the shvarim into a tkiya. No, it's the shorter, the way you interpret the Mishnah will determine a big thing. If a teruah means ta-ta-ta, and when you blow a sound that has the length of 3 little sobs, that's what the Mishnah calls a tkiya. Says Tosfos, now that we're machmer, now that we do shvarim, you have to make sure that your shvarim sound doesn't have the length of ta-ta-ta. Because the moment it has the length of 3 sobs, you made it into a tkiya. It's no longer a shvarim. Oy gewalt. The beauty of the minhag Chabad, that our shvarim is not a straight sound, it resolves all this. In other words, if a shvarim is just ta, 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 then you got to be afraid that maybe your shvarim has the halachic length of a tkiya. You ruined the whole thing. The moment you make a shvarim in a way where every sound of the shvarim is broken, then the sound of the shvarim is never similar to the tkiyah. Let me go weiter. Another very big topic that Tosfos speaks about, I'm going to say it by heart, Pasha, we have to move, and that is that the length of the tkiyah, prior and post, whatever the truah means, should have the length of the inner stanza. Which means that when you're blowing tkiyah, shvarim, truah, tkiyah, the tkiyah should have the length of both the shvarim and the truah together. Or longer, not shorter. The tkiyah prior and post tashrat are longer tkiyahs. The tkiyah that's before the shvarim and the tkiyah after the shvarim we call tashat, what Tosfos calls kashak. The tkiyah should be shorter. It should have the length of the inner stanza. The tkiyah before the truah and after the truah should have the length of that what you are blowing. That's the Tosfos over here and a lot more. Let's go right in the Mishnah. Now, talk about Rishono, we had this quoted many times. So now that the Mishnah says that you blow, beginning tarat, 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 right? You make 3 blasts, tkiyah, truah, tkiyah, 3 times. Even though really, ideally, you should be doing it with the davening. That was the beginning. And Malchiyos, Zechronish, and Shofars are 3 different brachas. So normally they are going to be separated one from the other. But, this is originally. But if a person did not blow it in the davening, if the person just blew them all in one go, then you're yoitza, as the Mishnah will write in a line. So it's shayach that you're going to do tkiyah, truah, tkiyah, tkiyah, truah, tkiyah, tkiyah, truah, tkiyah. When you blow it that way, the first tkiyah will be a sound alone, tkiyah. Then there'll be truah. What's going to come afterwards? Tkiyah. What comes after that tkiyah? Nachamal tkiyah. In other words, you're going to have 2 tkiyahs together. Now that we established that the length of the tkiyah is the sound, Larashi, of only 3 sobs, very short, let's say it's 2 seconds, so comes a blower and he's going to say, you know what, I have to do tkiyah and tkiyah. I'll blow 4 seconds. I'll make 1 tkiyah, that should be the end of the first stanza, and also the tkiyah of the next one. Says the Mishnah, not nishgut. Talk about Rishono, Mashav, Cheshniya, Kishtayim, Ein B'yodei Alachas. Most of the Rishonim learn, Ein B'yodei Alachas means it counts for the ending of the last clause. We already quoted the Maritz Geius, Big Shiti, he says you get nothing. But anyways, we're going to go according to most Rishonim, which is very good because today, okay, first of all, it's important for people to blow the shofar. What we just quoted in Tosfos is very important. To get into the habit of making an effort. Some people that I know, they have a watch and they have seconds and they push it, they know how long the shvarim teruah takes them. Let's say it takes them, 5 seconds. That's the length of their tkiyah. It's beautiful that way, it's symmetric. It means every sounding takes the same duration of time. But if you don't do that and you make the tkiyah longer, you're good. There's no Baal Tosef. B'chlal, there's no Baal Tosef here. People, like we're learning, the Torah says blow 9 sounds. 9 sounds. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Today it grew a beard. We grow 130 sounds. 130 sounds. Baal Tosef, there's no Baal Tosef. I'll give you an example. If God says eat a kazayis matzah, we end up eating what? We make a ka'ara. We eat 5 kazaysim. That's not Baal Tosef. That's not Baal Tosef. God says put on tefillin. If I put on tefillin, I take off the tefillin. I put on the tefillin, take off the tefillin. Not Baal Tosef. If I take off my talis, put on my, that's not Baal Tosef. Just to make that clear. If you blow a long sound of the tkiyah, you're good. You're good. But it only counts for 1. If you made it into 1 blast, it counts for 1 blast. Weiter. Now, mi shebeirach v'chakach nesmano loy shofar. Here, the Mishnah is giving a case where, again, originally, like the Mishnah writes in the first line, the shofar is shalosh, shal shalosh, shalosh. Chavre, that means 3 times tarat. Tarat, 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 but ideally not together, not back to back, because it lachatchila did not begin with what we call tkiyas de meyushav. It did not begin with us blowing the shofar in one go before Musaf. It began by blowing it together with saying the verses of Malchiyah, Zachranish, and Shofars. And that was a sugi that we just came off. And these are 3 different brachas. So they're separated. Says the Mishnah, it's not essential. So for example, when you were davening Shemona Esrei, when you were saying the brachas of Musaf, you didn't have a shofar. You didn't have a shofar. Now you get the shofar and you can blow them all together. You don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, which is mamash what we do. Versteis, Misha Beirach, and only then you get a shofar, Peseder. Toikeya umaria v'toikeya. that's called tkiya, trua tkiya, 3 times, back to back, sholosh pa'amim, consecutively. It doesn't need to be in the davening. It's not essential. It's ideal, not essential. Now, the final topic of the Masechta, and this is something that we will discuss more in tomorrow's daf and the siyum. The Mishnah now is not talking about the shofar. The Mishnah now is speaking about the shliach tziburs, davening out loud, using the rule of shomeya ka'oina means that me listening with kavana will make it tantamount to as if I said those words myself. And as we came through the sugya yesterday of all of the psukim that you have to mention and all of the restrictions, they did not have a machzer. You needed to be a baki in Tanach to put together a Shemona Esrei. Not everyone knew how to do it. So for sure, if I don't know how to daven Musaf and I listen to the Baal Tefilla, Avada, that's good. The question is, if I know how to daven Musaf, could I lechatchila listen to the shliach tzibur, or should I lechatchila daven on my own? That's the last topic, the last machlokes in the Mishnah. Tanach says kishem shliach tzibur chayiv kakol yochel yochid chayiv. Chayiv means not to blow, not to blow. To daven shmona esrei. When it comes to the blowing of the shofar, b'kitzur, I know we mentioned it, just to mention it again, we're coming towards the end. There's a big machlokes. Rishonim, is the mitzvah to blow, is the mitzvah to listen. L'chu'ura, by the fact that our nusach habracha follows those Rishonim that say that it's not litkoya, which is the nusach that they made in Yom Kippur Yovel in the base in Sanhedrin, but it's l'shmoya, the mitzvah is to listen. I'll give you a big nafkamina. What happens if, God forbid, someone stole a shofar and they used a stolen shofar? So in the Yerushalmi, there's a special pasuk that says you're okay. Question is, do you need that pasuk? Why would you not need that pasuk? Of course you need that pasuk. Because since we paskin that the mitzvah is only to hear the sound is not stolen. The shofar is stolen. So by the fact that the Yerushalmi needs a pasuk to say the Yoytze mashma from the Yerushalmi, the mitzvah is to blow. If the mitzvah is to blow, then it's more problematic if it's stolen. But anyways, coming back over here, we're not speaking here about the shofar. The mitzvah is to hear. Even the blower, the mitzvah is for him to hear. Here at Shmoyna Esrei, Tanakama holds, if you know how to daven Musaf, daven Musaf. Rabban Gamliel says, no, that even if you know how to daven Musaf, lechatchila, you can rely on listening to the Shliach Tzibur. Shliach Tzibur Moises Rabbi Yudei Chavos. And this machlokes we'll speak about tomorrow, God willing. Okay, says the Gemara. The Mishnah, again, the problem with the opening line of the Mishnah, not the first clause, that it's sholosh, sholosh. The problem is that the Mishnah says shiur tkiya ki sholosh teruos. Then the Mishnah says no, that the shiur tkiya is like 1 teruah. Because if 1 teruah, we're learning the Mishnah Rashi, if 1 teruah is 3 sabs, then the length of the tkiya is like 1 teruah. What does it mean? Of 3. And not only is that like a stira, but there's a braisa v'hatanya shiur tkiya is taka only like 1 teruah. Now, by the way, by us, we paskin that a teruah should be at least 9 sabs. And taka, that's the length. That's the length. But whatever the length of the teruah is, 1 tkiya should have the length of 1 teruah. Not 1 tkiya the length of 3 teruahs. Says the Gemara Abaya, no. Tana didon kachashav tkiya the kula bave. The teruah is the kula bave. No, it's now that we established that we blow 3 times. It began. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Every time you blow tarat, every time you blow a tkiya, the tkiya should have the length of 1 teruah. The tkiya has the length of 1 teruah. The clause of the Mishnah means, and every time it has to be that way. Every time of the 3 times. Don't think that if you did it the first time good, then you don't have to be careful in the length of the tkiya. Then you can make it even shorter. No. The braisa, tana of the braisa, kachashiv, chad bava. When you blow a tkiya, it should have the length. That was the toisvus. Whatever you will today, nowadays, blow for the teruah, whether it's shvarim teruah, whether it's shvarim, whether it's teruah, the tkiya that comes, that sandwiches the teruah, prior and post, should have the length of that which comes in between. Every time. Right. Shiur, teruah kegimel yevavos. Now, here the Mishnah uses the words yevava, and I know that nowadays we interpret yevava sab. And Rashi touched koldahu. A koil koldahu means a little sound. But there are other times that we use the word shvarim. As now we interpret the word shvarim as something a little bit longer. Correct. So our Mishnah and that Tana appear to disagree. Yes, they don't agree. Now we're going to see that from the beginning of time, right, according to Rabbi Goyen, people were allowed to choose how to blow the teruah, either like this or like that. That was up to us. And mistama, it had to do with how do I cry? Push it. Everyone cry like every person that makes too much l'chaim. What happens to them? This guy goes dancing. This guy goes crying. Same thing. When you go crying, how do you cry? So there was an option. So it says 3 shvarim. 3 shvarim means that they're longer segments. The shvarim is a longer segment sound. So Amar Abaye Yebahavade Pligi. Because it says Yoim Teruah Yelochem, and the Targum interprets Yoim Yevava Yelochain, and we have no idea what Teruah means. So you look at the Targum, we don't know what the Targum means. However, you know where we find the source of the meaning of Yevava? Look how the irony. According to our version, Uksiv Be'imei de Sisra, our arch enemy, when he was going to fight against the Jewish people, and he went into the tent of Yoel, and she killed him. And it says that the mother of Sisra was looking outside the window waiting for her son to return. And her chaveritas told her, don't worry, he just won the war against the Yidden, God forbid, and he's plundering, he's gonna come back here, he's having a good time. And she began to sense at the end of the day that her son ain't returning. And the Torah says, it says in Shoiftim that she was looking, Ba'ad hachaloi nishkava, she was looking out of the window, Vatiyabev, sister, and she began to cry. That's how we know B'chlal that Yevava means to cry. But how do people cry? The Tana that says Shvarim, he understands that crying means the mother of Sisri was groaning, she was krektzing, longer sounds. Umar Savar, our Tana holds Yalula Yalul. Now the irony that we learn how to make a sound from the mother of Sisra cannot be underlined. You have no idea how many drushes, for all the pulpit rabbis, I'm a chayid, have a field day with this. The only tragedy for all of the pulpit rabbis, myself included, is that there is a girsa that doesn't write Aim Sisra, it writes our mother Sarah. No one quotes that because then they lose the whole speech. So just to know that there's many that are goyres that when Sarah Imenu heard on Rosh Hashana that Avram Avinu took Yitzchak to the Akedah, and the way Hasidim teach, and then she heard that she did not shecht him, did she cry? So first of all, to be aware of that girsa. Now, if the girsa is Aim Sisra, so Takavi Kumtis, how can it be that we're copying the soundings of the shofar from the mother of Hitler? That's what Sisra was. So just there's so many classic responses to this. The Marimi Pano writes like this. He writes that it says in Sanhedrin that Mebnei Banav Shel Sisra Lomdu Torah Bebnei Brak. And who is that Rabbi Akiva? And as we know that really one of the Yael did the Aveda Lishma. I mean, she had a relation with him 7 times over. That's how she got him to fall asleep before she cut his head off. So she got pregnant. And from that came Rabbi Akiva. So the mother of Sisra represents, the mother Bechlal in Tanach refers to the Shechina. That when we look at something not good, most of us see not good. The Eibishter sees the potential good in everything, which is really the avoid of Rosh Hashana. That's part of tshuva. That even in Azah Sisra, he gave birth to Rabbi Akiva. And she was crying, being afraid that no one will see that potential. It was seen and was extracted. Now after she got pregnant, there was no need for a Sisra. But the real avoid of tshuva is Hisapcha is finding the good, the spark of good, even in the bad. Let's go weiter.
And the Gersa that has Sarah, what do they do with this whole pasuk?
They don't have this pasuk. I love it. Okay, Tana Rabbanon. Now let's go. I know it's late. I love this. You have to learn how to love this. From here all the way to the bottom of Daf Lamed Daled, before we come back to this Rababo who made a takana in Kesari to do Tashrat and Tashat, Tarat, this whole thing, we're gonna find now the sources in oral Torah. How do you know it's a shofar, not a trumpet? And how do you know 3 times? And the kitzur will be, nowhere does it say 3 times in one place. It says twice, 2 psukim, one in Emor, one in Pinchas for Rosh Hashana. Yom Teruah. It says regarding Yovel and Yom Kippur, Teruah. So first of all, we're going to put them all together. Is D'rai Truas. Then we're going to have to find other limudim that whenever you blow a trua, you don't blow a trua. Hashem doesn't mean it. He means a trua means sandwiched in between tkiya prior, tkiya post. How do you know that? There's two different approaches from two different tanoim. That will be the whole amid, and let's get moving. So Tanach Rabbanan, Kaidim Kol, how do you know that it's a shofar? Trua means to make a sound. Whether the sound means a sab or whether it means a krechts. Trua doesn't mean the instrument. It doesn't say a shofar. Answers the Gemara, you're right. By Rosh Hashana doesn't say a shofar, but in Parshas Bahar, when we're speaking about the mitzvah that we learned, this begins on the Sanhedrin. Then it goes b'chol artzechem. We just had that above. Ultimately, everyone blows. There, by Yovel Yom Kippur, it says va'avarta shofar trua. So the trua sound of Yovel comes from a shofar. So very nice. That's for Yovel. Says the Braisa, Einli Yala Yovel. But Rosh Hashana Minayin, Talmud Loimer. Oh, since it says B'chodesh Hashvi, where? By Yovel. Now, the Torah there speaks about Yom Kippur. We already know Yom Kippur is B'chodesh Hashvi from Parshas Pinchas. So when Hashem writes in Bahar by Yovel that you blow it on Yom Kippur, which is in the 8th month, just write Yom Kippur. I already know it's extra superfluous. To tell you that whenever the shofar is blown on the 7th month, now true, they were speaking about something that happens once in 50 years. But we know that shofar is blown every year in the 7th month. When? On Rosh Hashana. All of the sounding should be similar. Similar here means it should be coming from the same instrument. Okay, Aleph. Base. How do you know? Trua means Yevava. How do you, or ganuchay? How do you know that you have to blow a tkiyah before? Then we'll get to the kiyah. Minayin shebshut lefaneh. Second to last line on Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. Talmud Loimer. Since it says we're still learning in the Bahar, we're learning Yovel. V'ha'avarta shofar trua. It could have said v'tokato. So v'ha'avarta, Chazal understand it means a straight sound. A straight sound should be heard. Then a trua. Minayin shebshut lacharel. Because there it says taviru shofar, nachamol. The word mamash extra. Oh, so again, so now that you have a remes, it's amazing. We learned the instrument from Yovel. We learn pshuta lefanav all from Yovel. The last line, the ainli alaba Yovel, but Rosh Hashana minayin. So nachamol. Talmud Loimer, it says in Bahar that Yom Kippur is in the 7th month. B'chodesh Hashvi, daf lamed dalet. Ain't Talmud Loimer b'chodesh Hashvi, mamash extra. Right? Look inside the top Rashi, the Hakasav Lon Bekama Makaimis the Yom Kippur Machodesh Hashvi. Who? And here it says we're here in Bahar, in Yovel Yom Kippur. It says Yom Kippur. The moment you say Yom Kippur, I know it's in the 7th month. So Ma Tamaloim Machodesh Hashvi, it's extra. And this is called, my friends, a hekish to tell you shiur kol teruas hachodesh Hashvi zekozem. Now we go further. How do you know that? So trua, yoin trua. So trua means tkiya, trua, tkiya. But what was the first line we had in our Mishnah? It's biblically 3, which means 9. Midrash, it's 9. That's it. Imagine from the 9 it became 100 plus 30 la'arve vasatim. Uminayin l'shalish shalish. All right. And Nachrashi adds, and that's the one. Is by Malchios, one by Zechrenis, one by Shoifrois. So Talmud Loimer says the Braisa. Now we're going to put together all the psukim. Number 1, V'ha'avarto Shoifer Trua. Guys, we should remember these words. These are the words written in Bahar regarding Yovel Yom Kippur. Number 2, this is a pasuk in Emer regarding the normal Rosh Hashana. Every year Rosh Hashana, Shabbosain, Zichroin, Trua. Then it says in Pinchas, zum dritten Mal, Yom Teruah Yelochem. Total of 3. Now, so what? Uminayin litnas Omer Sholzeh, Bozeh, Bozeh, Bozeh. So in Talmud Loimer, Shvi, L'Gzeira Shava. And now we have a problem. Why do you need Gzeira Shava? We already said that it should all be the same. The Gemara is going to ask that. You have a Gzeira Shava. HaKeitzad, Shalosh, Shehem Teisha. Right? Mishnah is Shtayim Shein Arba. Here you have a Sholosh Sheim Teisha. And now concludes the Braisa. And now is like, this is the second topic of our Mishnah, that what's the length of the Tkiyah? Shiur, Tkiyah should be the length of the Trua. And again, we're learning the way Rashi learns. What is a Trua? What is a Trua? 3 Shvarim. And what's the Chaf? Right, 3, to tell you can add. At least, it can be more. Doesn't have to be 3 shvarim. Or today, we say that by Yosabs it's 9. It's not 9 and not more. It's 9 and not less. That's the chaf. That's the way we take a paskin. Okay. End of quote. Now we have the problem, like we mentioned. If you have a hekish, why do you need a gzeira shava? Haitanami karamais lebehekesha, simply by the fact that it says b'chodesh hashvi in Parshas Bahar, which is superfluous, and that's enough to tell you that all of the blowings of every 7th month are all the same. And v'hashtum, when it comes to the last topic of how do you know that every time you blow 3 sets, why do you have to use the gzeira shava? Answers the Gemara, indeed, hachika amar. Ilav gzeira shava, even without the gzeira shava, havamaisin lebehekesha, I would use a hekish. We are following the many Rishonim that learn that the only limud of the Yud Gimel Midos that you need to hear from your teacher is only a Gzeira Shava. L'kula alma Gzeira Shava ein adam don Gzeira Shava elim kein lamed mirabe. Can you imagine? Ein l'davar soif vayomer vayomer Hashem Hashem. You have to. Everyone knows that a kal v'chomer you can do by yourself. The big machlokes is what about the other Yud Gimel Midos? Rashi here, the Gilin Hashas points out that Rashi contradicts himself from Sukkah. Here we're learning not only kal v'chomer can you make by yourself, you can make a hekesh by yourself. So what the Braisa means, really we have a Gzeira Shava. Even if we would not have a Gzeira Shava, that's the pshat over here. We would learn it on our own from a hekesh. However, but now that we have a Gzeira Shava, so a kesha leitzarach. Nekuda. So Atkan, if you ask a Yid, where do we get this? Forget about what we do now. How did it begin? Rosh Hashana compared to the blowings of the shofar on Yom Kippur on the Yovel year. Says the Gemara, you should know that there is another Tana. And he learns it out from the trumpets that Moshe Rabbeinu made. That was uniquely a mitzvah on Moshe Rabbeinu, right? On Parshas Baha Alois Chatzei Lecha Chatzoitzrois. And it was used for 2 reasons. Either to gather the people or to signal that we are beginning a journey. One of the two. So says the Gemara, V'hai Tana, there's another Tana that Taka also uses a Gzeira Shava, but not a Gzeira Shava from Yom Kippur Yovel, but Gzeira Shava from Midbar. Midbar again is referring to the trumpets that was uniquely used by Moshe Rabbeinu. And now let's learn this Batanans, and then we're going to have a second Baraisa. Simple. Then the Gemara is going to point out why didn't one use the other. Each one has something that the other one saw as to be imperfect. The Tanya. Now this is a pasuk in Baal Loischa. Utekatem teruah. The words utekatem teruah could have 2 meanings. Either utekatem teruah can mean blast a teruah. You can teach it that way. Or you can teach it, make a tkiya and make a teruah. That's the teruah with the tkiya prior. It can mean one or the other. Says the Braisa, you know what it means? Not option number 1 that I mentioned. It doesn't mean make 1 teruah blast. No, it means taka 2. Tkiya and teruah. Tkiya b'fnei atzma, v'teruah b'fnei atzma. So asks the Braisa, how do I know? Maybe the words in Bahal Loischa was utekatem teruah means mach ein teruah. Sound the teruah. Tkiya utruah achasi. Answers the Braisa, that can't mean read the psukim, put it in context. Like we just mentioned, that Moshe Rabbeinu's trumpets were here for 2 reasons. Either to gather the people, or to signal that we are beginning to journey. So it says, Kishu Oimed, when Moshe Rabbeinu was blowing the trumpets only to gather the people, it says, Ubahaka l'sakohol, it says, Tisko'u v'loi soriu, only tkiya and not teruah, which means there's only 1 sound. We're not going into which one, only 1 sound. So now have a oimer that over here, when he's not gathering the people, when he's singling, when he's telling people to start traveling, the psukim, right? First the group that the achoinim, the ones that were east began to go, and then the ones that were I think on the north began to go. East south. Okay, so that's the say the deer. So when it comes to journeying, tkiyah b'fnei atzma and teruah b'fnei atzma. So at least chavra moshlem, it's simple. Utkatem teruah means a tkiyah na teruah. Uminayin shapshuta lefaneha. How do you know which seder? How do you know which one comes first? Talmud loimer utekatem teruah. Follow the order, not utoratem tkiyah. No, first tkiyah then teruah. Okay, good. Now uminayim shapshuta lachaneh, because there it says in another pasuk teruah yiska'u gavaldik. So actually, when he gathered the people, there was 1 sound. When we're journeying, tkiya, teruah tkiya. Rabbi Shmuel ben Oishar, yes, quick.
Overall, the tkiya shofar, based on all these liquids, do we hold that it's biblical obligation?
To blow 9 sounds, yeah. 9, yeah, and anything beyond 9, not. Okay. Now, Rabbi Shmuel ben Omer, the last limud, only the last. No, it's he goes with everything. That it means 2 sounds, that it has to be tkiya teruah. But when you are asking, how do you know that after the teruah there was the tkiya? I don't need your teruah yisko. Ein tzarech. Why not? Because when it says utekatem teruah shenis, again it's east, and then it's south. That was the seder. So it says he made the soundings. The Yidden that were living, the 3 Shvatim that were living in the east, began to travel, and then he blew again. Now I know that the word shenis is not needed. It makes sense because Taka first he made 1 soundings, and people that lived in the east began to travel. All right, and then he blew again. The Torah didn't have to say the word again. We would understand it means again. Shenis is a remes. Shenis means that for every teruah there are 2 tkiyas. That it says teruah, there's got to be a second tkiya, not only tkiya post, tkiya prior, oichet tkiya post, tkiya shniyala. Now, so all of this, see, forget about Yovel. This is the way we journeyed. It's amazing, and not even with the shofar, with the trumpet. Okay, but that was in the midbar. Ainli ela ba midbar, but Rosh Hashana minayin. Talmud loimer trua, you have gzeira shava. Trua l'gzeira shava. Now I want you to know like this, bekitzer. When you make gzeira shavas, there's something called the gzeira shava mufna mitzad echad, mufna mishnei tzedadim. This is the general rule. If 2 topics logically are very compatible, we don't always need for the word to be extra. Whenever it's not compatible, here it's not compatible simply by the fact that I just mentioned, one is trumpets, one is a shofar, at least one word has to be used only for the gzeira shava, and that will be a problem. Why will that be a problem? Because how did we get to the 3 sets? Because it says trua. It doesn't even say it in the same place. 1 trua, so far we learned, was in Yovel, Yom Kippur, and 2 times in Rosh Hashana. We're going to need one of them for this Gzeira Shava. Just have that in mind. Okay. So now, v'sholish truos nemru b'Rosh Hashana. Guys, the words of Rosh Hashana is not dafke lav. It's not. We don't have 3 in Rosh Hashana. Like we mentioned, we have 2 in Rosh Hashana and we have 1 by Yovel. It says the first one is Parshas Emor. Shabbos in Zichron Truos Taka Rosh Hashana. Number 2 is Pinchas. Vaiter Rosh Hashana Yom Teruah. Number 3, here you go. Vayikra Chafei v'ha'avarto shofar teruah. But it's fine. So 3 times a total of teruah and ushtei tkiyas cholachas v'achas. So metzinu lemeidim sholish teruahs v'sheish tkiyos. Really continues the Braisa like we just mentioned. The moment we are making this gezeira shava to chatzoitris to the midbar, and therefore 1 teruah is needed. So according to this Tana, Danny, that's to answer your question. I said 9 is midoi raisa. According to this Tana, it's not true. It's only 6 midoi raisa. Because since 1 teruah is needed for the Gzeira Shava, biblically, midrabanan they said it. Nemru, really, but Rosh Hashana shtayim. Really, it's only 2 teruahs. Midivrei Torah. And the 3rd, the achas means the 3rd teruah, which comes with it, tkiya before and tkiya afterwards, that's midivrei soifrim. And the Braisa taiches. Shabbos in zichrein teruah, Parshas Emoir. Listen. V'ha'avar to shofar teruah, Parshas Bahar, Yom Kippur, Yovel. That's not needed. Good, that's the teruah. But the Yom Teruah Yelochem. Now that we have to make a Gzeira Shava linking shofar, linking Yovel with Chatzoitzreis, they're not similar. You need to have a Gzeira Shava Mufna. That is needed for the limud biblically. So that really, the answer to your question is that if you compare shofar, Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur to the midbar, biblically, you only have to make 6 sounds. Midrabanan, they added another 3. And then, did it grow a beard. Now, Rabbi Shmuel, Banachmeni Yom Rabbi Yonasan, I'll tell you more than that. Really, according to this Tana, only 1 is midivrei Torah, and shtayim midivrei soifrim. And he says, v'havar to shofar teruah. How ironic, Yovel. That's midivrei Torah. Shabbos in zichrein teruah, which is Parshas Emoid, and Chevra the 2nd widest line, and teruah, and v'yom teruah Yelochem, and Parshas Pinchas, both are needed biblically. Now, midivrei soifrim, everyone agrees that it began with shalosh. But let's see, hold on. Why do we need to have 1 of the 3 also? So like this. No, the Gemara doesn't have to say that one of them is needed for the Gzeira Shava, that we know. But what's the Talmud? So the words Yoim is to tell you that the mitzvah of blowing the shofar is only by day and not by night. Now, Ve'idach, that didn't say that Achas midivrei Torah, because that is not needed, because he knows it. By Yoim v'lo min Nolan, I'll tell you how, because for Yom HaKippurim. Yom HaKippurim. Says the Gemara, the other Tanach, Yom HaKippurim, Yalif, Nigranav Minel Pshulot Nachrel. You know, if you anyways have to learn something from Parshas Bahar, why didn't you learn all of it from Parshas Bahar? No, it's why doesn't the second Tana, what's wrong with what we began in the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, why don't we learn everything from Yovel? So he tells you why. Because if you remember the Brais, it says, V'ha'avarta taviru. Both of these words, he learned something else. V'ha'avarta taviru le'mashmalahu. You know, you can't learn Tkiya before and Tkiya after from there. Why not? Ela my darshu b'hu v'havarta. So from the word v'havarta, we had this above. He will learn that which Rav Masna taught us. What did Rav Masna teach us? That if you take a shofar and you boil it in water and you make it very soft and you manipulate it by what? By making the wide side narrow and the narrow side wide. You're not yotzem. Where did we learn that from? From the words v'havarta, the way it was worn on the animal. V'havarta derachavarosoi. If we would not have had the comparison to Bahar Loischa, if we only would have learned it from the pasuk in Bahar, we would have erroneously said that you know what the words ta'aviru means. Ta'aviru doesn't mean you don't have to blow the shofar. How do you know you have to blow the shofar? Carry it in your hand. We don't blow the lulav. In other words, if you only would have learned it from there, you Bechlal would have argued wrongfully that the Medafnish Blazen, it's only Na'avre Biyad. So that's why you need to learn now by the Chatzoitzroitz. There it's clear, the Torah says to blow it. That's why you have to go to Baal Loischa. Now you have to know the other Tana. Ve'idach, the Rav Masna, our Tana, the Aflamed Gimel Lamed Beis, also has the limit of Rav Masna, that what? That if you invert a shofar, it's not good, but he learns two things from the same word. V'havarta chevra means to make a straight sound. But you can also learn, don't flip it. You know why? Because to make a straight sound, the Torah could have used the regular lashon of utekatem. That Rav Masna mid the shana b'dibure. Normally you write utekatem, and the Torah writes not utekatem, but v'ha'avarta. So you learn two things. Number two, the words taviru biyad loimatzas amrat. You never would make that mistake. You know why? Because the Gomar Avara from Moshe Rabbeinu, guys, not Bahaloischa. We already find the words Ha'avara where after we began to donate money for the Mishkan in Parshas Vayakel, and Moshe Rabbeinu says, Vayiviru koil b'machna, enough. Oh, this is Yom Kippur Yovel. And it says over there in Parshas Vayakel, Veitzav Moshe Vayaviru koil b'machna. So we already know that the words Vahavarta doesn't mean to carry something, it means to articulate, to make a sound. Malahal Mekoil, Afkan Bekoil. Now let's go Punkt Vaker. So now that we explained why Ulahai Tana the Maisa Midbar. No, it's the one, the Daflamed Gimel, the Tana that we have over here, and Daflamed Dalet. If you tackle learn it from Parshas Baha Aloischa, so I have a kasha now. Afkan Chatzoitzroitz. No, you know, we have a concept, like you compare it to, so maybe you should blow trumpets. It's amazing. Now the answer would be, what's the answer? The answer is that the Torah uses the word shofar, but where does the Torah use the word shofar? By Yom Kippur, by Yovel. So if we learn it from Yovel, there's no question. But if you ikir limitus from Moshe Rabbeinu and Bahal Loischa, so taka blow trumpets. So here you have to go to Tehillim. In other words, which normally we try to learn everything from Chamisha Chumshe Torah, but here he's going to hold, since it says in Tehillim, how many times did we already have this? Tiku b'chodesh shofar. Here it says shofar. It's not clear, befedish, that this is about Rosh Hashana. But the Torah adds, Tehillim, Bakeseh, L'yoyim Chagenu, and how do we darshan this pasuk? Right, we had this in Daf Ches, plus, Eizehu Chag, which Yom Tiv is on the day that the moon is still hitting, more even, Shavuos is not in the beginning of the month. That's the only one Yom Tiv. Have a, right, there's Chodesh Kislev later, and now we have have a Omer Zeh Rosh Hashana. And it says in Tehillim, shofar, that's how you know it. Chevra, good. Amazing. This is the best Gemaras, but now we're coming back now to Amirai. So it's clear. 3 times Teruah, every time Teruah, one prior, one post. So that should be tarat, tarat, tarat. Genuk. We also already had today on Lamagim Alamed Beis, that there was a machlokes tanoim, what does teruah mean? But now, says the Gemara, asking Rabbi Abohu, when he was the Rav, the Mara the Asra in the city called Kesare, it says today in Eretz Yisrael, they told me it's a very wealthy city. Who Allah give him. Rabbi Abohu had a good Kesaria, he had a good position. He made a takana that Tkiya, Shloisha Shavarim, and the Teruah, and then the Tkiya. No, it's until him, as we mentioned above, either Tkiya, Shvarim Tkiya, or Tkiya, Teruah, Tkiya. He made a new thing, Tkiya, Shvarim, Teruah, Tkiya. What we call Tashrat, or what many Rishonim called Kashrak. Again, I'm saying the word Kuf because the Taf also stands for a Teruah, not to confuse them. What kind of takana is that? If, when Hashem says, right, so how do we get to here? Let's go to our Girsa. It says Yom Teruah. The Targum says Yom Teruah means Yom Yevava, right? We know from the mother of Sisra, Yevava means crying. We have a question, how do people cry? Either they moan or they sob. So, if Yevava means Yelule Yalel, sobbing, the shorter sounds, so then you should do Tkiya, Teruah Tkiya. If the Yom Teruah, Yom Yevava means Ganuchai Ganach, the krechts, to moan, which are longer sounds, so then La'aved, Tkiya, Shloisha Shvarim, Utkiya. So what's this? Shvarim and Teruah. And explaining, we're beginning to explain what happened. That misapkele, there was a doubt. So you know what he did? He did both. Hold on. Maskavla Rabavira, I don't understand. He had a doubt. But if it's one or the other, if it means Yilulei, if it means a short sobbing we just learned all of these limudim that prior to the teruah, right before you have to make a tkiyah. The shvarim is a hefsek. We don't know, but God knows. If it means to make a teruah, what we call a teruah, so the shvarim is a hefsek. Mafsik, shloisha shvarim, bein teruah letkiyah. So the Gemara says, yeah. Don't think that all that Rababo said is just to blow tashrat 3 times. No. Enachanami. You also have to blow the hadar of a tkiyah teruah tkiyah 3 times. 3 times. There is such a possibility. So he also agrees you got to blow tarat, tarat, tarat. Hold on. Maskav Ravina, we're not done yet. Maybe God, when he said Hashem, when he said Yom Teruah, Yom Yevava, means dafka only ganucha hava. And if it only means a shvarim, we also learn from the braisos above, every teruah has to have post, a tkiyah. Nothing is allowed to interrupt. We're going to learn in the next sugya, time is acceptable. But that's because you're not making other sounds. If you're not putting another sound, that's a problem. So, and if you verstehst, the Gemara clarifies. No, you also do tashat. By the way, according to the Seder of the Gemara, it sounds like that his takana was to do tashrat, tarat, and tashat. We don't do it that way. We do tashrat, tashat, tarat. But let's leave it. Now, hold on. So the Gemara says, Ela Rabbi Abo, my asking. No, he had a doubt. So at best, Shlomo, the Gemara is asking, let Rabbi Abo say, do this and do that. Do tashat, do tarat. In other words, like, why did he even say to do tashrat? No, answers the Gemara. This was his chiddush. Rabbi Abo says maybe it meant both. Dilma gonach v'yolil. Maybe you got to do both. So so now you have 3 options. So you got to do all 3. What's the Gemara's next question, Chevra? There's a 4th option. What's the 4th option? Tkiya. Hello. Teruah. Shvarim. Tkiya. And that's also a possibility. Imagine then, we would still be blowing from Rosh Hashana. Tkiya, Teruah, Shloisha Shavarim, V'Tkiya, because maybe first Yalul and then Ganach. The Gemara says that's not an option, because Tamad Milsa, the way people cry is first Ki Misra Be'inish Milsa Bereisha Ganach. when God forbid there's a calamity that befalls a person, the first emotional reaction is, oi. And then you begin sobbing. Father Yalil. Amen. So now, let me speak out the following. Okay, so here is where the Rabbi Goyen and everyone, not everyone, many of the Rishonim quote him, say, how can there ever have been a doubt, a suffix in something that we do every year? So Rabbi Goyen says that when Moshe Rabbeinu came down, he told us we can either do this or we can do that. We have options. The problem with the options is that the people, the Hamoin Am, these are the words of Rabbi Goyen. If I came from a village where they always did just the Teruah, and then I'm going to hear another group of people just doing the Shvarim, I will think they did it wrong. So he made an enactment where everyone should do everything. And Taka, Rabbi Goyen says that there were communities that, it was not that known, that did both. There were always people that did all of these options. He regulated it by saying let everyone do everything. And then he speaks about the idea of having two Torahs, how we don't want for people to observe the mitzvahs differently. And we know that some of Yiddishkeit, we have Ashkenazim, we have Sfardim, but this limited, like Beishamai Beisilul was the worst. Like we're not allowed to follow Beishamai, Beishamai Markam Beisilul and Mishnah, the concept of everyone being more or less on the same page. Now, the big question here amongst the Rishonim is that when he said to blow a shvarim and a teruah, that's the Rabbeinu Tam over here, Rabbeinu Tam says that it has to be separated with a breath. Tkiya, shvarim, a breath doesn't mean that you have to remove the shofar from your right lip. A breath means that breathe in to be mafsik between the shvarim and the teruah. The Ramban says that you are not supposed to make any breath hefsik between them. Minik Chabad is, being that, Bekitzer. So really, how many soundings did we learn about? We learned about 30 soundings. If we're going to count the Shvarim and the Teruah separated, so it's 444, 333, 333, use your calculator if you need, that's 30 koilos. Really, it began blowing it by Shmoina Esrei, by the Shliach Tzibur. From there we went, even when we're davening the silent Shemona Esrei, make again all of these sounds. So 30 became 60. Then we added what we call Tkiyas de Meyushev, which are the Tkiyas, the soundings that we blow before we begin Musaf. The word Meyushev means, because even though the minig is that everyone stands, but you are allowed to sit. The blower has to stand. People are allowed to sit. When you daven Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, people are standing. That's just the way we differentiate with what we call Tkiyos de Meyushev, especially based on what the Mishnah says, that you don't need to do it in Shemona Esrei. The case in the Mishnah was, you davening Musaf, you didn't have a shofar. So it's fine. So we blow 30 blasts before, then we blow 30, then we blow 30, and the Tosfos that we, again, to go back to Daf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines under the Gemara. So Tosfos says, going back to the mother of Sisra, that we have a tradition, Keneged Meya Pa'ois, the Paya Imei de Sisra, that when she was sobbing that her son is not back, she cried 100 times. So what do we do now? We add 10 soundings when? By the Kaddish Teskabel, which is also great, because theoretically it keeps everyone quiet even until the middle of Kaddish Teskabel. That's 100. And then we added another 30. I want to just begin. I want to begin the bottom line over here. So let's begin with Rabbi Yechanan. Yeah, you got it, Shlomo. The last line, just to open up the sugya. This is where we're going to take off tomorrow. That Shoma Teisha Daf Lamed Dalod Amid Beis. We turn the page, we feel good. Shama Teisha Tkiyas B'Teisha Shos Bayom. Let's go back to the beginning. It began with 9 sounds. Tarat, tarat, tarat. Says Rabbi Yechanan, if someone heard all of the sounds, but they were not juxtaposed, forget about the fact that they were not in the Musaf. That doesn't matter. You heard a Psatkiya, then later you heard another sound, then later there was a big pause in between one and the other. It took you the whole day. Says Rabbi Yochanan Yatza. That's the new topic. And as we will see, why Yatza? Why in other areas you're not Yatza? And then eventually we're going to come to the final machlekes we have in the Mishnah regarding the Shliach Tzibur, L'chatchila b'di'evet. And tomorrow we are making a siyum with the help of Hashem.